It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers today. So I'm going to start by introducing Fred Keating. So welcome, Fred. Fred is
You.
from Maple Ridge, BC, and he has been living with dementia for several years. He has worked in media as a writer, has volunteered as a part of the Maple Ridge Historical Society, as well as with various media-oriented organizations, and is also an affiliate member of the local Royal Canadian Legion. So Fred is currently navigating the new normal of dealing with a dementia diagnosis. His key hobbies are hiking and reading. So thank you, Fred, for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
And then beside him is Rosie Keating. So
Hi.
hi, Rosie. Rosie has been a special educator in England, Alberta, and BC since 1975. She comes to the Alzheimer's Society of BC as a care partner for her husband, Fred. So together they are learning to navigate their new pathway forward. So thank you both for joining us for this discussion today. And
Welcome.
next, I'd like to introduce Heather Inglis. So Heather calls the Southern Interior an Okanagan home. Between 2014 and 2022, she was a caregiver for her mother, Gloria, who in 2012 was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. She also cared for her husband, Gary, who had a liver transplant in 2016. Prior to retirement, Heather worked for 24 years at the Vancouver Public Library and 11 years for the Canadian Union of Public Employees as a workers' advocate and labor negotiator. So, supporting others affected by dementia through her role as a support group facilitator and a lived experience partner has become a positive part of Heather's grief recovery. So, thank you so much for being here with us, Heather.
My pleasure.
And last, but definitely not least, I'd like to introduce Arabella. Arabella is a lifelong learner. She has two master's degrees, an MA in speech from the University of Hawaii, and an MA in social psychology from Ateneo, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, a university in the Philippines. She was a manager of training at Bell Canada in Toronto for over 10 years before she and her husband started their own business of international speaking and training. Arabella was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment soon after her husband passed away in 2015. Arabella is very active in her community with three different clubs: the Comox Valley Head Injury Society, the Alzheimer's Society of BC, and Toastmasters International. She is a world traveler, a researcher, a gardener, and a joyful dragon boater. She's also a nature lover with few deep friendships and beloved family far away. Arabella celebrates her life in beautiful Comox Valley, which she calls her Eden. Well, thank you so much, Arabella, for joining.
Pleasure.
And I just want to welcome all of our panelists today for this really important conversation about reacting to a diagnosis and navigating feelings of grief and loss. It's such an important part of the journey. So I'm very excited for our conversation. And before we dig into today's panel discussion, I would like to pose a question to those that are listening in. So if you're comfortable doing so, please let us know in the chat box what brings you joy and or brings purpose to your life. So what brings you joy or brings purpose to your own life? And later on in the webinar, we're going to refer to some of your responses. So the first topic that we're going to speak about is reacting to a diagnosis. So receiving a diagnosis of dementia can stir up a number of emotions. So some of those emotions that are commonly experienced can be shock and numbness, as well as denial. So in the beginning, denial can be a positive and protective force for us. So we use denial to kind of shield ourselves from painful news while we adjust inwardly to a new reality. People may also experience anger and frustration. So many people feel angry and frustrated about the diagnosis. They may be angry at the disease, themselves, their doctor, or at other people in their life. And often people experience some form of grief as well. So people may go through periods of feeling helpless or powerless in the face of this diagnosis. They may feel sad when considering the losses that this disease may bring, or they may feel worried or fearful about what will happen next. And then there's acceptance. So acceptance does not mean necessarily that you're happy about the situation. With acceptance, you're accepting the problem rather than avoiding it and realizing that the situation must be adjusted to rather than actively changed. Because as we know, often we can't change the fact that we're living with this diagnosis, but how we adapt to it is often within our control. And so, even when we feel that we've reached a level of acceptance, it doesn't mean that we won't feel anger, grief, or even denial again. And so, unfortunately, it's not always a straight path forward, but can be a winding road. And so, I'm going to direct the first question today to you, Arabella. So, Arabella, how did you react to hearing your diagnosis? And what did you think and feel in the first few weeks or months that followed?
Soon after being diagnosed with MCIs 7 or 8 years ago, I reacted with overwhelm, staggering fear. I doubted the value of living. I was worried that be like my father in his early onset dementia, no longer the brilliant, dynamic dad that I know, but a stranger who could not do things for himself, had temper outbursts, and constantly got lost. I was frustrated with the loss of my functions, spent much of my life looking for lost things, paying for medical appointments I missed, having avocados and produce rot in my car because after buying them, I forget to bring them up to my fridge. And my biggest embarrassment, my smoke alarm blasting the fire sounds, beep, 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 and shouting, fire, fire. Oh my God, I turn off the stove. I take the burning pot into the sink, open the window, and fan the smoke alarm to take out the smoke. And oh, I hope it'll stop beating and shouting fire. Oh my God. Next time I buy alarms, I'll choose the soft beeping ones without a voice that shouts fire. No more. My biggest loss. It appeared I could not write speeches anymore like I did in my professional speaking and training career that I loved. Unable to write, looking at the blank screen for 3 whole days, I often gave up in frustration. And I thought the one intellectual activity I so enjoyed seems lost to me now. And it caused the greatest grief to acknowledge I had to give that up for the rest of my life. Most of my life, I lived by my wits. Without my memory, is life worth living? My friend told me, Arabella, you might as well have Alzheimer's. You're so obsessed with it. And my siblings told me, big sister, don't tell anybody. Just
Yeah.
don't think about it. All of us
Yeah.
go through aging anyway. I told my friend and my siblings, I believe there's a small window of opportunity, especially at the start of dementia spectrum, where I can still seize that window to lessen the risk of going into full on dementia. I need to seize that opportunity while the window is still open because I believe it won't be possible when I'm already in full on Alzheimer's. And that was how I started with my journey.
Thank you so much, Arabella. It's so many emotions to work through shortly after a diagnosis. And we're so grateful that you are here today sharing your story with us. We've had so many people living with dementia share their stories as well, and it's incredibly powerful. So, Fred, I'd like to ask you a similar question around how your journey started and how you reacted to receiving a diagnosis.
Well, the diagnosis has been a couple of years ago now, and I Rosie was the person who reached out to the organization after the diagnosis and said, "My husband's got this. What do we do now?" And your organization pointed us towards these group sessions of recently diagnosed folks. And I thought I had accepted it fairly well. I don't know. But I do remember that when the lady leading the session listed some of the aspects of acceptance, like denial, anger, curiosity, whatever. I do remember saying to her, there's one more word or emotion that you should have up on that board, and that is guilt, because the more painful aspect of my acceptance of the diagnosis had to do with recognizing the
Impact.
recognizing that I wasn't the guy I used to be, that I didn't have the capacity I used to be. And I used to pride myself on being somebody that my partner, Rosie, and my adult son and daughter could rely on, and had done since they were born or since I met her. And so I felt the most difficult thing I felt was guilt, that I could not service them or be the guy that I had been for them for 55 years, 50 years, something like that.
48.
Thank you.
Not 55.
Between the two of us,
We get
there eventually.
straight, yeah.
Anyway, that was the more difficult thing for me, was guilt. I felt guilty about the diminishing capacity mentally. I've tried to compensate for that by upping my physical activity, but for me, it was even though I don't blame myself for getting it, that's what I was wrestling with, the loss of capacity or amount of support I could give the family, who've really stepped up marvelously. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Thank you, Fred. And you're right. I think guilt is an emotion that so many of us on this journey experience. And it's often something we hear care partners talk about. And you're right, people living with dementia can experience those emotions too. So thank you for sharing that. Rosie, as Fred's partner, what was that experience like for you, and how did you react to his initial diagnosis?
Well, as Fred said, really, to begin with, we had gone through a similar experience with Fred's mom, who had dementia. So I started quite a few years prior to the diagnosis seeing some of those same kind of warnings, that maybe something wasn't quite right. And so the journey for me was trying to get help and to go to the family physician, who again would say, oh, it's aging, or it could be this, we'll give it, more time. And as time went on, I realized, no, in terms of my background in education, early intervention was a thing that was something that was really important for the kids I was dealing with. And for me, it was, we need to know what we're dealing with so we can do as much as we can, when we can. So it was going to an initial workshop with Alzheimer's Society that gave me the language to use when I went back to the doctor to say, it's time for this kind of an assessment. We need to know what we're dealing with. So, I felt a lot of power because I was able to move through these things really before Fred came into the picture to start to deal with that. So I felt empowered because I was doing something, and that helped. When we got the diagnosis, that I was able to relax a little bit and to think, well, at least I'd done as much as I could to ensure that we were going to get the help and the support that we needed. And so once we got the mild cognitive impairment diagnosis, and Fred was struggling with that, Again, I took my time to kind of introduce them to the Alzheimer's Society, and it was on one of the lived experience Zooms that, you know, some of your speakers were just so positive in terms of it wasn't a life sentence, that, you know, we were able to embrace it a little bit more and be more positive, learn about it. And so, you know, that was my journey, just making sure that we got the diagnosis and we could start to put some strategies in place. So
I agree. I came away from that webinar with, I think, Jim Mann and
Yeah.
another gentleman, as well as a lady
a
who had
lady
been
who lived with
diagnosed
it for many
for
years.
20 years. And she
Yeah.
was sort
Yeah.
of 90 at the time.
Still, you know, able to travel and talk. So that, I think, gave us both a lift.
Yes, it changed a lot of, I guess, prejudices I didn't even know I had when I saw these guys interacting with each other and joking. And if there was a little word retrieval issue or something like that, one of the other guys would say, "Spit it out," you know. Let it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was the humor and the camaraderie.
Mhm.
I came away from that particular webinar
Yeah.
quite changed
Mhm.
in my thinking.
Thank you both for that. I'm so glad that the society was able to be a positive part of your early
Critical.
early
Yeah.
days, and
Very much.
you speak
Mhm.
so beautifully to the power of sharing firsthand experiences and stories in platforms like the webinars. And now here you are today sharing your story and
Yeah.
hopefully instilling hope in others that are listening, and because it doesn't mean the end of a meaningful life. And so thank you for telling us a little bit about what the start of your journey looked like. Heather, I'd like to hear a little bit about how your caregiving journey began and how you reacted initially to your mom's diagnosis.
Well, the first uh, hint I got of suspicion was uh, when my dad died in 1993. I started phoning my mom every night and continued with that. And we were night owls, so I always phoned her at around 11 o'clock at night. And one day I said, "But Mom, we talked about this last night." And she said, "Oh, I take my Ativan. Don't count on me to remember anything after I take my Ativan." And I thought, well, okay, I accepted that. And then we went on a cruise together and spent 15 days in a cabin. And I noticed all kinds of little hints. But the thing that made me want to take her to the doctor was she said, "I don't want to go to formal night. I'm just going to stay in the room." And I said, "Okay, that's fair." So I went into the cabin 5 minutes before dinner to put on my dress, and my mother was fully dressed for formal night. And I was surprised. And I said, "I thought you weren't going to do it." And she looked at me like I was crazy, and I just let it go. But that's when I thought, okay, there is something going on. Let's go to the doctor. So we had the same family doctor, and so I talked to the doctor ahead of time, and we went in with Mom. And we got diagnosed very quickly, and we got to see a gerontologist in New Westminster very quickly. So that was good. Um, Mom was kind of surprised that I was pushing her to go to the doctor to deal with memory issues, because she, of course, hadn't seen what the issues were. And that continued on throughout the journey, that she was living in a little bit of an alternate universe. And so I said, let's sit with this for a month, because it's a lot. And so, and I wasn't living in Burnaby at the time anymore. So I came back to Burnaby and we talked about it. And I said, Mom, you're fine here. You can continue doing all of your stuff. I mean, just, yes, you have a diagnosis, but you can still do everything that you're doing. And if it comes a time that you can't, then we'll talk again. And so continued on with the nightly phone calls. My My mother won Citizen of the Year in the city of Burnaby in 2008. She was very engaged in the community. She volunteered 6 days a week with different organizations. Her biggest shock and stigma was that, but I got straight A's in school, and I was smart, but you're still smart, Mom. You can still do all of the things that you could do. Even before she started to decline, uh, she was exactly who she always was. Um, for me as a caregiver, I was also at the time dealing with my husband who was in end-stage liver failure. And so I was trying to figure out how I was going to manage uh, supporting him and supporting Mom at the same time. Um, and it was a challenge. In hindsight, uh, I am so glad that I was able to support my mom through her journey. We had a lot of fun. I got to spend so much more time with my mom than I otherwise would have been able to. And at the end of the day, she said to me, she had this moment of clarity uh, 2 days before she passed and said, "Thank you for showing me how much I'm loved." She just came back to tell me that. And that just made all the hard stuff melt away. And so I think as caregivers, there is so much joy and love in the journey, even though it can be difficult to, to lose the person you love slowly, but they're still there, just different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for sharing that beautiful last moment with your mom. It's incredibly touching. And you're right, if there's a silver lining sometimes is the relationship, it doesn't disappear throughout this disease progression. It
No.
changes and we adapt, but the person remains and the love remains. And so thank you for sharing that. We're going to talk a little bit more about loss because that is an aspect of this journey. So receiving a diagnosis of dementia or mild cognitive impairment is often accompanied by a series of losses. So it can be helpful to both identify and acknowledge the secondary losses that follow as a result of a life-changing diagnosis. So grieving secondary losses is a normal and healthy part of learning to adjust to our new normal. So an example of a secondary loss may be the loss of the identity, the way that we saw ourselves and knew ourselves, or the loss of the future that you had planned. Retirement may not look the way you thought it was going to look. And when we identify these losses, we're better equipped to understand our own grieving process and give ourselves grace, as each loss is important. And it's important that we grieve each loss, and it's real and very valid. And so I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to talk a little bit about a loss that you've experienced. So can you share a secondary loss that has impacted you? And Heather, is it okay if I start with you?
Sure. Um, it's my world. I was very fortunate that I was able to retire quite young, and so I didn't have to deal with uh, juggling work and caregiving. But retirement became caregiving became my retirement, and so as things progressed, I lost my own engagement in the community. I had to give up my volunteering. I had started a small business with a friend and I had to step away from that. My world became, as my mother's world shrank, my world also shrank because she needed more support from me. And so um, it took quite a bit for me to gracefully let go of those things and accept uh, what life was becoming. But again, it was fulfilling. It wasn't burdensome. It was um, I'm more of a positive silver lining type of person, and I think that that helped me a lot because I knew at the end of the day that everything that I was losing, I would get back, and I just needed to focus on relationships and um, recognizing the value that caregiving uh, provided. Yeah. So it was, yeah. And then at the, and then rebuilding afterwards, which is where I'm at now. Because at the end of the day, it was literally, okay, I don't do anything anymore. What is it that I do? And I was forever changed by the experience.
Thank you, Heather. And I think so much of navigating this journey is the perspective that we have. And yours is a beautiful one. And thank you for sharing that with us. And you have so many gifts that you're now giving to this community. And we appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Arabella, would you be able to share a loss that you've experienced following your diagnosis and how that's impacted you?
Thank you. It was very painful to lose my memory. I used to think I was intelligent, but I realized it was only good memory that I had before. When I didn't have it anymore, I wondered what can be of me. So, like most of the things I did with life, I delved into massive research. I figured out that it was too expensive to and time consuming to take tests to see if I was the inheritor of the Alzheimer genes from my father. So I set about doing what I can do, whether I actually inherited the genes or not. I canceled my cable TV and my Netflix subscription. Instead, I looked for Alzheimer's summits, management, and documentaries. I read books like Dale Bredesen's The End of Alzheimer's, whose protocol of nutritious foods, brain supplements, good fats, and avoiding sugar and bad seed oils as much as I can. I also continued with my Toastmasters clubs, whose helpful members suffered through my many attempts to use technology. It was very hard to do that. Comox Valley Head Injury Society activities became so important to me. The weekly lunches where I can talk to other brain injured survivors, the wonderful activities of dragon boating, quarterly special, rock climbing, archery, fishing, art, singing, yoga, drumming, meditation. Not all at the same time, but all of these were like lifeboats of activities I can hold on to while being cast in an ocean of fear and anxiety. I held on to those life rafts for dear life. I started to join Alzheimer's Minds in Motion program weekly. The chair exercises of 30 minutes and conversation for 1.5 hours. The exercises were excellent. The conversations were often fun and brain boosting. When the pandemic happened, I tried to avoid the COVID mandates and stayed in Mexico for 5 months, despite objections from my family and some friends who said, "Mom, you you don't know anybody there. You're doing this alone. You're crazy." Even while I was in Mexico, I joined some Minds in Motion sessions via Zoom. Life began getting better. I recorded every conversation with specialists with my phone. I made lists of things to do and counted the number of grocery bags so I know I could bring them up to my fridge and not have them rot again. My brain worked better in Mexico than more than in any other location I'd been in the last 10 years, possibly because my brain followed the regular circadian rhythm in Mexico. I'd wake up and do my Qigong workout while watching the sunrise. I'd go to the swimming pool workout at 1 p.m. or swim in the ocean at sunset. I walked everywhere. Sometimes I ran for the bus or taxi, even though I fell twice during these runs. Mexico had so many beautiful scenery and yummy food, whether from street vendors or fine restaurants. I even took Spanish classes for 6 weeks. Bad decision. It was so it was so very difficult learning Spanish with my poor cognitively impaired brain. But I enjoyed the experience. If I could, I'll travel to a warm country in winters. Just after I get my cataract surgery and medical exam here to see if I can still drive. This time, I'll travel to a place where I don't have to learn a new language. And that was how I dealt with going through life with my diagnosis.
Thank you, Arabella. And so, despite changes to your memory, you are a great example that you can still live well despite those changes. And there's the connection to your community and your social connections are so powerful part of living well and coping with this disease. So, thank you. Fred, can you share a little bit about a loss that you may have experienced following your diagnosis and how that's impacted your life?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Figuring that the primary loss is length of memory. And as Mark Twain once said, I think of all the things I've ever lost, I miss my mind the most.
The most.
But as far as secondary losses, it would quite easily be my own work. My curse is that I love what I do. I loved what I did, and I love what I do. It's a lot of fun. I get to interact with creative types, actors, writers, folks in the business of storytelling and inspiring other people's creation and appreciation of life itself. So that I miss. And in addition to the generation of a certain amount of revenue each year, which is now diminishing with the diminishing of my job opportunities, we put some little scaffolding in place. Rosie and my daughter, who's 33 and a very busy woman in her own career, have been helping me organize sort of a bon voyage year. 2025 will continue a reduction of work and good times with some clients that I've had for upwards of 40 years, 20 years, 15 years, hosting their conferences and special events, whether they are corporations or not-for-profit associations or government entities. I love that kind of work. I love being on the road. I love interacting with folks, seeing them on an annual basis, and actually becoming part of their occupational family, whatever industry it happened to be. It was like a series of family reunions every couple months to appear again amidst these different professional communities. That's my secondary loss. And I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with that. Again, with support from Rosie and my daughter, making sure I'm in the right place, the right time, have my trousers on, that kind of stuff. At any rate, yeah, it's funny to some, isn't it? But at any rate, that's the secondary loss. The stuff I love, and I can remember my grandpa used to say, any man ought to be able to make a success of himself by just working half a day, and whether it's the first 12 hours or the second 12 hours, put in your 12, you're bound to
Yeah.
make something of yourself. So anyway, so I'm grappling with that, filling my time with reading and getting outside when I can. But that's the secondary loss. Not the work, not the revenue, but the people.
Mm.
And my clients were my friends and remain so. But that's what I kind of miss, the kind of merry-go-round of staying busy.
Thank you, Fred. I mean, I think such a sense of purpose and our identity can often come from the work that we do and how we choose to spend our days. And that can be a very profound loss for many of us. And I think the Alzheimer's Society of BC has been able to benefit a little bit from your free time and having you join us in some amazing programs and sharing your story. So there's still so much, I think, left for you to contribute, but it's important to identify those losses.
I'm grateful for the opportunity. The organization has already given me so much education, so much advice and counsel, and so much support that at the very least I could do would be open my little toolkit, such as it is, and put it to use again for your team. It's that simple.
Well, we're incredibly grateful, and you have so many skills left to share. So thank you. Rosie, has there been a secondary loss that you've experienced as a result of your caregiving journey?
Well, I think as most partners, I would imagine, feel that inability to share the load quite as evenly as, you have in the past. And so I embraced retirement. And I knew Fred never would. So it has been a bit of a struggle to support him to maintain this next year, because, for a lot of that organization, he was able to do it. So he would manage his trips and his flights and his organization. So having to take that on, kind of was a loss of my freedom in terms of my loving to be retired and to have those community connections that I was enjoying. So part of this journey has been to try to help Fred come to terms, with the kind of retirement approach, which it's fine, and to look to fill that space with other things that would bring him as much joy. So yeah, you're right that, him starting to be involved with the Alzheimer's has definitely, filled that space. So that has relieved a little bit of the stress, and trying to find things that, to kind of reawaken some of the passions that he's let go. Music was a big thing when we were first together.
Mhm.
And so I really encouraged Fred to pursue things like that. And so he did start taking ukulele lessons, which I was quite amazed that he embraced, because I thought he would say, yeah, no, not doing that, but it did, awaken that. So helping him kind of start to fill in those spaces, because I believe it's a natural process of kind of letting go of work. But I know that Fred identifies with a lot of that. So trying to find some of those connections in other ways. So, it's still a balance. And as I said, we're still at the beginning of the journey. And so I try not to look too far ahead and to take one day at a time, but there's definitely ups and downs. We've always been a couple who like to challenge each other. So
But as Rosie usually says, we present very well.
oh, we do.
Yes.
Yeah. It looks as though everything is going along swimmingly, and there are tough days, but yeah, we still try to get the humor in a little bit more. But so yeah, it's that recognizing that, as we move forward, the burden will shift a bit more to me. But I also recognize that it's really important to take care of myself, that whole oxygen
Yes.
mask, and because again, with my background, talking to parents and to other kinds of caregivers, I know that community connection for me with music and my dancing is what will help me, stay a little bit more balanced. So yeah, I think that for the most part, we're doing well. We recognize we're at the beginning of the journey. So.
Yeah.
Thank you both. And I love that you brought up humor as a coping mechanism, because I have really enjoyed Fred's sense of humor and the chances that
Really?
I've, yes, I do.
Did you just say that again while I've got
My daughter and I do not think he's funny at all.
nor do I, but people seem to laugh.
I think it's an incredibly powerful coping mechanism along this journey. And when I recall when I was a support and education coordinator facilitating early stage support groups, one of the things I absolutely loved the most was the humor and the camaraderie and the connections that were built. But you would think we would spend a lot of time, being emotional and crying, but we spent, I think, even more time laughing and connecting and
And that's
embracing this with
so
humor.
true, Kimberly, because I mean, one of the first things I reached out to was the caregiver support group, and we laugh about the situations we face, and that is just such a relief. So no, I really agree with that, and that's been a real support for me, that caregivers group. Yeah, Fred wanted to come, remember?
Yeah,
Well, do I have to come to this one? I said, oh no, this is just
My
me.
time.
And that's another, I think, really important point, is that both parties along this journey need time for themselves, need their own source of support, and ability to talk about what they're going through without fear of judgment or of hurting the other person in the relationship, as well as your own sense of self-care and your own hobbies and purpose. It's so important in navigating this.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Okay, I think we will move on to our last question, which is around overcoming feelings of grief and loss and refinding purpose along this journey. So, Fred, I'm going to start with you if that's okay. How have you navigated any feelings of grief and loss and found a sense of purpose and meaning throughout your dementia journey?
Well, at the risk of repeating myself, one of the nicest aspects of the journey the has been the support and the education and information we've gotten from the Alzheimer's Society of BC. It's plain and simple. I must admit, when when I got the diagnosis, my first thought was, really? Really? Now what? This is not the way I expected to spend chapter 3. You know, and I would, and frankly, I was at a bit of a loss, because not like I had some incredible sense of purpose prior to the diagnosis. I did what I thought I was supposed to do in various situations, socially and work-wise and otherwise. So in a sense, sucking up all the education and the communication and the interaction with uh, other folks, my companions along the journey, uh, has in fact provided me with uh, a purpose that I don't think I had prior to the diagnosis, and basically that is sort of, you've got this toolkit in terms of speaking or presenting or so, and you claim to yourself that you can still do it. So why aren't you doing it? And so opening my little toolkit and volunteering in various meetings and sessions and projects that you've brought to me, Kimberly, and some of your colleagues have as well. Um, that's really given me a purpose that I didn't have before.
Mhm.
Strange to think of this whole thing as a bit of a gift,
Mhm.
but it turns out that it has been.
Mhm.
So, and it's kept me occupied in a way that I think, I'd like to think it has made it somewhat easier on Rosie and my daughter and my son, that I'm not, oh, I have my blue periods, I have my moments, that's for sure. But they recede more quickly than they used to, and I'd like to think that that has taken some level
Mhm.
of a burden off of Rosie's shoulders and my children's worry about me not being the dad that I was. So I got nothing but gratitude and appreciation for that that exercising of my purpose to try now and to tell people, some of them in my old college and high school classes, it's not so bad, painless. I've lost a lot of relatives to a lot more
Yeah, worse.
painful journeys, and as almost everybody in my life has ever told me, well, Fred can do it, anybody can do it,
Right.
So I'm saying, you used to tell me that, so, let me,
Mhm.
anyway,
It's a journey.
it's a journey, but
Do you,
I'm enjoying the journey more
More
than
than
I
you
thought I
thought.
would.
so happy to hear that. And do you have a strategy that you use if you're feeling kind of down or unmotivated or blue that kind of picks you up?
I do. I've got used to, Taylor Swift, shake, shake, shake it off. I, I, in the early part of my diagnosis, and when I actually had the diagnosis, I used to go to sleep at night, and even when I wasn't sleeping, if unless I was actually involved in a project, actually typing or writing or reading, anytime my attention got off the project right in front of me, my brain would immediately default to, well, you got it, right? You know, you got it. I got you. It was, I won't say it was driving me crazy, but any time there wasn't anything specific on my mind, my brain reverted to, well, you got dementia, and I got used to literally flicking it off, like like a fly or a mosquito buzzing around my head, and it seemed to work. So even laying in bed at night, if I started to dwell on that, I physically bat it away, and it started to work. So
And your music too. I mean, you would sit and play your uke
yeah,
and
that would take
sing.
me to
Yeah.
another place.
Because, you know, when, and I keep thinking about these things, but when we met, you know, you played all the folk songs
Yeah.
and you're back there now. Like I can hear him singing away the songs that we used to sing in the guitar and on the piano and now. So that gives you comfort, I think.
I think it does.
Yeah.
I had a one-man show, my wandering minstrel year through
Yeah.
Ireland and
So,
England.
you
That's
know, revisiting that.
brought back
Oh,
the
wow.
biggest, most expensive souvenir I ever had.
I thought all Americans were rich, so I just thought, this is my meal ticket out.
And I thought the Brits were all royal, so we both got what we deserved. I don't understand it to this day.
Yeah, so no, I do
Sure.
think that that music has helped you kind of
Yeah,
pull
it
yourself
has.
up.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Maple Ridge Senior Center has a great ukulele program. We even tour to other senior centers
Amazing.
around and perform. So
Mhm.
performing
Yeah, so he's still
again
doing
50
that,
years
right?
later.
That performance that he's needed throughout his career. So we found ways for him to, yeah, to kind of still get that joy, that passion, right?
It's lovely. Music is such a powerful tool. And I wasn't expecting a Taylor Swift reference, so
Yeah,
there you
really.
go. You got me on my toes.
Oh, I read all the right magazines. I know what Tay-Tay's doing on a daily basis.
Love it.
Rosie, is there anything you'd like
Where
to
my daughter
add?
is cringing
I
right
know,
now.
really. It's because she was talking about it. Again, I think that, you know, trying, you know, to recognize that I'm going to have bad days and so is Fred. And we've always been like that throughout
Yeah.
our marriage, you know. So usually when one is down, the other one
Yeah, that's true.
can pick them up. But for me, it was to try and get him a feeling of being passionate about something. So it would take some of the, you know, the emphasis off me. And I guess I'm a fixer. So, you know, reading a lot and trying to kind of, you know, fix this, which isn't fixable. So learning to kind of let go. And I remember one of the very first meetings that I went to years ago. And again, it was at the senior center, and it wasn't an Alzheimer's meeting. It wasn't a BC, you know, society one, and I said, you know, I'm frustrated and I'm trying to help him do this. And someone said to me, well, does he want your help? And I'm like, well, but he should, you know, because I wanted him to kind of still be the person, you know, and so to try and fix up the holes and stuff. So having to kind of let that go and realize, you know, that he has to make his own decisions still, and whether I feel that's the right decision or not, that you know, being self-sufficient is something that I have to recognize is still important for him. So to kind of giving him the space to be who he is. So I'm trying to relearn. And I mean, you know, we can't stress enough how important the Alzheimer's Society has been, you know, and one of the workshops, a lot of the stuff that I do occasionally still is work with adults with disabilities who, you know, who have huge stress responses. And so, but your workshop, you know, on that topic kind of informed me and gave me some new language when I go forward, you know, in work. And so what my mantra is, like, connection rather than correction. And I've always been a teacher, so I've had to really try, you know, and I don't know that I'm very good at it, you know, stepping back from that need to correct, but it's something that I'm learning to do. So.
No comment.
Thank you both. I can imagine there are people listening in today that can relate to that desire to want to fix the
Yeah.
problem. And that's part of why I think we feel helpless sometimes along this journey, and things are a little bit out of our control. And when things are out of our control, it can be scary, but learning to let go and be in the moment and focus on connection is such great strategies.
Yeah.
All right, Heather, would you
Mm.
be able to share a little bit about how you've navigated your own feelings of grief and loss and found a new purpose throughout this journey?
Well, my mom actually passed away from a heart condition. And my mom and my sister and I believed that that was a blessing that she had a heart condition, um, because she spent the last year in um, long-term care. And of course, a lot of people in long-term care have dementia. And so, my mother didn't want to be um, where she was. She didn't want to lose her dignity, and um, so it was counterintuitive um, to want release for her um, earlier than she might have. Um, there were a lot of very complex feelings for me. I tried to keep her in her own home as long as possible. And I had told her that as long as she was safe, um, that she could continue to be in her own home. But if that changed, we'd have to talk about it again. And I was so grateful that, despite her reluctance to move into care, she almost immediately fell in love with being there, and which I was very grateful for. And it gave me the opportunity to be her daughter again, not so much a caregiver and trying to figure things out. I knew she was well taken care of. And so I could go and visit her, and we would sit in the movie theater and watch movies. And I just got to be her daughter again, which was just such uh, a lovely thing for that last year. Um, so after she passed, I spent my husband and I had an RV lot in the Shuswap, and I went there by myself, basically for 4 months, and sat by the river and tried to regain my physical and mental health, which, grief is one thing. Recovering from caregiver burnout is something different. And so recognizing that there were two different things going on at the same time, some of the things look the same, but I would get frustrated with myself about, why am I not feeling better? Why am I still so tired? Why? And then when I sat and thought about it, it was like I was so depleted um, at the end of the journey, um, that I had to build it all up again. And that takes time. And so I had to remember, for all of the kindness that I had poured into Mom's journey, I needed to then pour that kindness back onto myself. And sometimes that's hard to do, but I'm still doing it. And um, after my husband died 2 years after my mother did, and um, sorry, um, I waited for a year before I thought about what it is I wanted to do. And Rosie talked about the value of the caregiver support group, and I could not have gotten through um, uh, my journey without the support of the other people in my group. And so when I felt that I had something to give back, I really wanted to volunteer with the Alzheimer's Society as kind of a legacy to my mom, but also because the lessons that we learn along the way um, are things that you would never, ever dream of. And I felt that if I could help one person because I knew one random strange thing, because we had this extraordinarily crazy thing happen, if I could help somebody with that, that became my purpose, was to share what I learned, to be encouraging, to give people hope, because then that makes it all worthwhile to be able to share. Even though it's a bit like, even now, I have big emotions coming up. Um, why would I want to put myself through kind of picking at a scab whenever I do something? But it's still there, and it's okay, and it's a way of honoring my mom and everybody else in our communities who are struggling with this. And there are so many people. I mean, I live in a very small community. It's only 1,700 people in Ashcroft. And so all of the people who are struggling with dementia, you end up knowing them personally, and their families have been part of your lives. And so, you know, people come to me now because I'm the Alzheimer's person in Ashcroft. And it's okay because I understand. And sometimes just listening and being encouraging um, helps. And when Kim and I were talking about this webinar and coping strategies, I said, I live in the week now. I couldn't deal with thinking about my future um, without my mom and my husband. I couldn't think about that. So I just thought about the week. And I find that if I live in the week, I don't look at my calendar for next week. I just look Monday to Sunday, and I can manage Monday to Sunday and the things that are within the week. And it has made me so much more present in my own life because I'm not thinking about the future or worrying about the future. I'm just thinking about today and maybe tomorrow. And I better think about Friday because I'm flying to Portugal. But
Ooh,
but
nice.
but that has been my strategy, and I embrace it, and it's going to continue, I think, on for the rest of my life, because if you're present, there's so much joy in being present and being present for other people as well. Because in my age group, my friends are all dealing with the loss of parents and spouses. And so
Mm.
I'm happy to be able to support them in that, because my hard part is over, and it makes me happy to help. That's my parents ingrained that in me.
That's
So
awesome.
thanks for the opportunity.
Mm.
Thank you so
Mhm.
much for that, Heather. And I know it can be, it brings up a lot of emotions when you talk about your journey through grief, and a journey that you're still walking
Yep.
and adapting to. But what you just shared was, I think, very powerful for people on this journey to hear. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Arabella, I am going to take just a moment. I'm going to pull up some images that Arabella is going to conclude the formal part of our presentation with.
But not yet. I'm going to speak without
Okay,
the.
you start first.
Thank you very much. When I was asked to participate in Alzheimer's meetings and be a panelist for the Alzheimer's annual convention last year, I saw two people who were diagnosed with dementia. Mario, 15 years ago, and Lynn, 25 years ago. They seemed to be fully functioning and accomplishing a lot. I wonder they what they did, what they ate, what medical interventions they took. Mario's answer was, I take it one day at a time. And Heather, like you, I look at my day and I try to create it rather than to see what happens. And 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 then there were two milestones that really made a difference in my life. And the first one, and Heather, this is what you'd you can bring the screen. I mean, sorry, Kimberly, my first. Okay, I had two milestones this year. One, I fell again, but for the first time, I fractured only a finger. But you wouldn't believe how that finger has tons of influences impacting everything in your body. And honestly, I never gave the dirty finger to anyone. But for but for 3 months, I was giving them to everybody.
Everyone.
And then I thought, ah, well, I was also able to go dragon boating. And I thought, wow. I mean, first of all, I wondered, is the universe telling me my traveling days are over? Because if I have another fall or accident happens somewhere else in the world where I don't know anyone, how can I manage my care? Then I realized, actually, Arabella, the universe is giving you a great training for being able to manage your care everywhere in the world. If you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. Besides, I can still attend outdoor picnics and dragon boating, even with a finger fracture. Life can still be fun. And for the second milestone, the slide, I reached that in August. I reached the ripe old age of 80. I don't know why I'm still here, because I asked the universe to please take me away in my prime of life, which I thought was 35 years old, because I could not bear going through what my parents endured in their disease-ridden years. But they said only the good die young. But I outlived them both and I'm still kicking around. There must be a reason for me to live this long. I discovered that I'm so grateful for the privilege of reaching 80 years. People give me the respect and congratulate me for fully participating in life. I believe there's a lot I can do to help younger generations and seniors avoid the disability and distress that illness can overwhelm us in our winter years. I learned from research and clinical studies I took that I should look outdoors as soon as I wake up. This was a sunrise from my deck 2.5 weeks ago. I saw it as more brilliant, more long lasting, more beautiful than the ones I've seen all summer. Am I right? I checked using an app with artificial intelligence. I did find out that the Geophysical Institute of the University of Alaska published an article showing that indeed sunrises during winter seem longer lasting, brighter, more intensely colored because there's a lot less impurity in the air. There's a different angle of sunlight. There's some reflective snow cover and extended twilight all contribute to the unique and stunning quality of winter sunrises, especially in Alaska. Like sunrises, we may actually spend our later years with more brilliance than we had known before. Each day I greet the sunrise, I expect there will be gifts from the universe. What could those gifts be today? More joy from connecting with friends and family, more peace from meditation, more brainstorming and learning, and research showing Dementia may not mean the end of life, but the beginning journey of hope. And though life will always be with challenges, it could be celebrated with more learning, more loving, more laughter, more joy. From the early days of my diagnosis, I often visited my garden for comfort. I cherish the words from William Wordsworth. What though the radiance which was once so bright forever be taken away from my sight? Though nothing can give back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, we will grieve not, rather find strength in what is left behind. In addition, nowadays, with regained confidence of earlier years, I look to poet Alfred Tennyson, who admonished us to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. There is more life to live. Even now, there are scientists who are discovering that some patients are able to reverse some forms of dementia through lifestyle and a combination of many factors. I'll continue to do things to make my brain function as well as it does now. So, in the winter of our life, we may be able to find sunsets and sunrises or everyday simple moments of silence and serenity, simple joys which are more precious to us now more than before. And such is the blessing that I wish for you all. May the life force be with you. Thank you.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, wow.
Thank you so much, Arabella. I think that was just a beautiful and lovely way to conclude our discussion and really speaks so well to the fact that this isn't the end for us. And we're all walking this journey with grace and hope. And so thank you to each of you today for being here to share your story and let us know a little bit about how you've coped and navigated some of the challenging and hard emotions and losses that can accompany this journey, but there's so much hope still remaining. So we have a few moments. So I would like to invite the audience, those tuning in today, if there's any questions that you have for our panelists, please do feel welcome to put them into the chat box. And we all spoke about how we found purpose along this journey. And Michael, I'm going to ask, were there things that our audience members shared in terms of how they find purpose in their own lives? We'd love to hear.
Yeah, there was quite a few shared in the chat box, but it was about an hour ago, so I'll go through them. Jean said spending time with friends. Chris mentioned volunteering. Holly said grandkids with an exclamation mark. Joey said my cat. Susan mentioned being out in nature, walking and hiking, and spending time with friends and family. Blair said, for Diane, it is being with me, Blair, and our daughters. Also ice cream.
Ice
Rick,
cream.
Rick, who identifies as a caregiver, said hiking in nature and doing nature conservation work and leading educational tours. Cheryl shared that she enjoys family and friends, volunteering, and hiking / walking / dog / reading.
Lovely.
Sage also said volunteering, gardening, and reading. Linda said gardening, walks, dinner with my husband and my little dog, Brad. Patty said our dog, Arlie. Dawn mentioned my faith following Jesus and particularly my wonderful wife, Vel. Maureen mentioned connecting with others, sharing activities, music, and more, being in nature, listening to birds in my yard, and appreciating my life. And one last one here from Tobias. Playing disc golf, a low barrier fun activity for all ages and abilities, and playing in the beautiful parks and outdoors and natural environment.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing those because I think there's so much we can all take away from the different ways that that we find purpose and meaning. I heard a lot of themes around nature, connecting with people in our life, whether they be two-legged or four-legged, um, reading, gardening, those types of activities, and music. So much importance there. Arabelle, there is a question for you about where you stayed in Mexico during your extended
Mm.
visit.
I stayed in Puerto Vallarta.
Ah,
So many beaches, so much beauty, so much great food. So I was warned against Mexico because of the gangs and all the what you call the drug cartel. But really, I was careful and I was lucky and I was grateful. I'd go back in a heartbeat, ex- except for Spanish.
so challenging to learn a new language, but the beauty of being in such a warm climate, the beach and everything, the culture, was a positive for your quality of life.
Very much. So,
Oh, somebody mentions they're going there on Saturday. Well,
well,
I'm
that's
jealous.
great.
So we have comments thanking our panelists for sharing, for being vulnerable, letting you know that they learned a lot and are really touched by your authenticity, the way you've shared your story. Beautiful presentation. I appreciate the honesty, the positivity, and the hope. I think there was so much of that woven throughout what everyone shared today. There is some questions around research, and we will have some Research Connects webinars coming up. So there'll be more to talk about on that topic.
Can I interject
Mm-hmm.
for a moment?
Absolutely.
I think that because we talk about stigma a lot in in uh, in some of the work that we do, and I think that storytelling, as we've witnessed today, is very impactful. And the more we tell stories out in our communities and we share with our friends and our families, and it just becomes a lot more relatable. And there's so many people in our communities that have the disease or have a member of the family with the disease, that the more we tell our stories, um, the more we just help everybody in general and normalize conversation around dementia. And that's really what we need to do, is normalize the conversation around dementia so people aren't afraid to talk about it.
I completely agree. In the work that I've been blessed to do with the Lived Experience Partner Program and helping provide a platform for people to share their stories and experiences, I've seen the power of storytelling. It's an incredible way to break down stereotypes and reduce stigma. And I hope that those listening today might feel hope along this journey and know that there's a purpose and that you bring so much wisdom. I think the power of the support groups that many people shared is that
Oh, yeah.
everyone in their essence is an expert in their own journey and brings so much wisdom and tips and strategies. And so we always say in those groups we don't give advice, but there's so many learnings that are shared.
Yeah.
So much power in that.
And
There is a
everybody's
sorry.
journey is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
To embrace the fact that, yeah, it's not going to look the same for everyone, and that's okay. Yeah, there's supports there to help you get through whatever path you're on. So that's so important.
There is a question around exercise or if there's medication or things that you are doing in your routine that you have felt have really added quality to your life. I don't know if anyone can speak to
I,
something that they do, maybe exercise or how they get out.
I'd like to speak about qigong. I greet the sunrise with this ancient Chinese practice of Qigong. It's the mother of Tai Chi. And it allows you to breathe, and there is a lot of visualization and very easy movements. And if one looks at Alzheimer and fitness research, exercise is the one thing that is so great for every one of us, for all parts of our body, including our brain. And I believe that this is so worthwhile for us to do, even though Qigong, for example, is such a small thing. It's easier than yoga, easier than whatever else I can think of. And yet it allows me to open the day with a treasure, with a gift. And I look for presents from that day, from my first experience with sunrise and doing my Qigong practice. So it's a healing practice for all of us. And I would highly recommend it, especially if you can do it out in the open. That's the way that the Chinese do it.
Thank you. Anything else that's been helpful? I know we've covered music and exercise. Fred, I know you find walking very
It's
therapeutic.
unfortunate. I live next to a beautiful provincial park with well-maintained trails, and it would be foolish not to take advantage of that. So, and it's easy. Beach driving back and forth. The gym, I can step outside, walk 15 minutes, and I'm in no man's land. It's terrific.
Nice.
Mhm.
Nature, I think, is an incredible healing tool, whether we're just being present and taking in its beauty, as Arabella showed with the sunset, or sunrise, and taking moments of meditation, walking, being present in the moment, as Heather mentioned. And you mentioned that where you really went through your grief journey was in
In
nature,
nature.
alone, connecting, refinding yourself. So I think there's incredible power in that. Okay, well, I think this will bring us to the end of our session today. To thank each of our panelists for just the incredible knowledge that you shared with us today, for letting us into your story and helping us understand, that there is a way through grief and loss, and many ways to cope and thrive along this journey. So thank you. And then before we go, I would just like to remind everyone, if you have additional questions that maybe we did not address today, or you would like to speak to somebody, please feel welcome anytime to reach out to our First Link Dementia helpline. For people in British Columbia, the First Link Dementia helpline has English services that are available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. at 1-800-936-6033. We also have helplines for the Chinese and South Asian communities available from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And those that are living in the Yukon can also reach the helpline by calling the toll-free number 1-888-852-2579. And just thank you all for being here today. And again, thank you to our panelists. I'm so grateful to have each of you with us. So thank you.